Yo,
Mm,
hey, you gotta introduce the cleaning video.
just do it.
You want me to do it?
Just do the thing.
Okay. Hey, what's up? No. Hi. No. Hello. No, that's not right. Hey, what's up? I'm Shane. This boy's sleeping, so today, this is the way studio works. Did I do it? Thank you for joining me on the next episode of the Build series. That one was a doozy. We are on episode 3 of the Peugeot Versailles restoration. This job was tedious, and the deeper I got, the more it expanded. This is where we clean and polish and degrease and clean everything again and again and again and again, polish it and make sure it's rust-free and all the things. It never felt like it was going to end. But with some persistence, some dedication, and a little bit of magic, we got to the end. And that's how we turned this into this. That was just with a little degreaser. Wait until you see what it looks like after a bit of polish. But first, we got to clean up some of this mess. Oops, forgot about my little graveyard here. So the gnarliest part that came out from this bike were these little pieces that just like crumbled and fell out of the headset. I don't know what it is, but it is disgusting. And there were several of them. Look at this. What the f? And then we have all of the little bits and pieces that I used to break into this shell, the outside of the shell, the bearings, the spindle. That is just done. And looking at these pieces, it was just as I thought.
Trash.
Thankfully, we were able to locate a bit of treasure too. Thanks to a reseller on eBay, we were able to find a standard cup and cone bottom bracket for this frame. And it's Peugeot, so let's see if it works. So the plan was degreaser bath, rinse it off in hot soapy water, and then dry it off. Then I ran into some stuff that I didn't really plan for. I didn't expect that some of this grease was going to be so challenging to get off, some of this dirt and this grime. I didn't expect it to be that challenging to get off. So I started with soaking everything for a little bit, and then, thinking that a quick and easy, pass with a nylon brush or a brass brush was just going to eliminate everything. I was wrong. So I just did my best to soldier on. And a lot of the process looked like this. It was degreasing, cleaning, washing, rinsing, inspecting, washing again. It never felt like it was gonna end. Wiping off again, inspecting, rinsing, washing, never stopped. So everything required, 2, 3, sometimes even 4 different passes with nylon brushes, wire wool. Sometimes I broke out the stainless steel brush. I upgraded the solvents that I was using at one point. I broke into some evaporust and then decided to let everything soak in the evaporust because that knocked out most everything. And while the evaporust did help tremendously, it added a number of days to this process. So in hindsight, I probably would have gone the evaporust route first. Additionally, I did want to save the chain for a couple of reasons. I wanted to make sure I knew what chain I needed to replace it with, and I also wanted to make sure I had an additional tool for when I remove the freewheel from the hub. So now that everything has been through the degreaser, I am hitting every single piece with a detail brush and soaking it in soapy hot water. After everything was rinsed off, then a nice clean microfiber towel to remove any remaining dirt and debris. This was another long and tedious process, and where I found that I needed to clean multiple parts multiple times.
Wasn't expecting to shine on.
Now, that wasn't the case for everything. There were some pieces that just came up real nice, like this front derailleur. And the quill stem, that was okay. I decided to run that through the bench polisher a little bit later. Now, taking a closer look at everything, some of these things don't really need a whole lot of attention. Headset cups after the degreaser and the wipe off looked really good. Shift levers, they had some haze to them, but we could try to work that out. These look really good as well, but still not as shiny as I really hoped for in the long run. And then there was, of course, the rear derailleur. Little foreshadowing, this whole thing comes apart.
Oh yeah, I didn't forget the handlebars, I didn't forget the bike frame, didn't forget the wheels, didn't forget the fork. Just gonna kick that down the road because right now I'm in the deciding factor on whether or not I want to paint the frame or to just clean it up and make it shine again.
So starting with the fork, I figured knocking off a little bit of this rust and a little bit of this grime would help me in determining if the frame and the paint on the frame rather were worth saving. So we rubbed this down after a nice bit of degreaser to see the state that it was truly in. And boy, did this thing come up nice. So that doesn't really help me because now I want to save the paint, but the frame is different. So let's take a peek at the bottom bracket. I sprayed this overnight with a little bit of WD-40 and figured nylon brush it out, that'll get it. Nylon brush didn't work, so here comes the brass brush. Figure we'll take a little bit of the brake cleaner, see if that'll knock it out. It did not. So now we're going to option number 3, which should have been option number 1.
I did attempt to do a time lapse of the evaporust on the bottom bracket, and let me tell you, that was the most underwhelming, anticlimactic 30 minutes that I've ever watched in my entire life.
And while the time lapse may have failed, the evaporust did not disappoint.
Look at those pretty threads. My goodness. All right.
Once everything was cleaned though and finally dry, I took certain pieces to the bench polisher. I took like a Flitz metal polish to others with just like a microfiber towel and really wanted to make some of these pieces shine. What I encountered were, a depth of scratch or a depth of damage to certain components that weren't going to come out no matter the amount of wet sanding or polishing I did. Some of those scratches were just too deep. And that's okay because this allowed me to pivot a little bit in my approach. I wanted originally this bike to be brand new. And what I'm seeing are pieces of history, scratches, dings from crashes, from drops, from whatever. I don't know. What I do know is that I don't want to completely erase the history that this bike has lived. So a lot of these components still have some scratches, but they're a lot prettier, they're a lot cleaner, and they're going to work a lot better after a full service. And I think that is the motif that I want to carry forward with this project. I think it's just taking me a little bit of time to come to terms with the fact that this bike doesn't need to be perfect. Hit the boy with the reminder. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. I needed the reminder. So I'm not gonna let perfect be the enemy of good, but it will be better. And it's been fun along the way. So after days of degreasing and cleaning and polishing some of these components, it was time for me to break down the brakes so I could do a deeper clean and a polish and a service on those. And the same thing with the rear derailleur.
And so I started with disassembling the rear derailleur here, removing the limit screws, making sure that both the upper knuckle and lower knuckle bolts were removed. Everything I found, and this is even after the soak, even after, I bathed it in hot soapy water, it had to be cleaned again. So this added again to the timeline of start to finish. Not only that, I had to remember where everything went. I had to make sure that every single piece, every single screw was accounted for, that I mentally mapped where everything had gone. Thankfully, I took a lot of footage to help me remember how everything went back together after, it soaked in evaporust for days.
Thanks. Grody.
At this stage, I was evaporust crazy. So the front derailleur had been sitting for a little bit, and after sitting for a good bit of time, it was perfect. I don't know what else to say. Evaporust for the win. So same process after, gets a rinse in the hot soapy water, then in with the detail brush in some actual water, then as dry as possible. I don't have an air gun, so making sure that this part didn't rust after the fact was good. Up top, we can see the rear derailleur that has been completely disassembled. All those pieces had been soaking in evaporust for a couple of days as well. They went through the same process of rinsing, washing after the fact, and then drying every individual piece with a microfiber. And then we did the same process with the brakes. Now the brakes didn't have a whole lot of rust on them, but there were a couple of pieces that I could not remove from the brake itself. So that did go in the evaporust, and that extended the process again.
There's your piece. We will do another detailed clean on these before rebuilding.
So as you probably saw earlier, I took the chain rings apart so I could bench polish everything. Now I'm just replacing all of the little rivets that attach the large chain ring to the small chain ring to the crank arm. And I'm making sure to grease all these pieces as well before going in, just to make sure I prevent any corrosion, rust, so I don't have to go through this long extended process on this bike again. Not that it was bad. Look at how pretty this is. So we have the rear derailleur completely disassembled, cleaned, polished, and we're ready to start knocking it out. So we'll start getting going. There are a number of different lubricants that are used during a bicycle restoration, depending on the use case of the part and what you're trying to protect and what purpose they serve. So I'm using a high performance grease, a standard general purpose grease, a synthetic oil, and a thread locker as part of this process.
So this piece here It's supposed to swing around and catch here. And I'm just running into spring resistance.
So the gloves had to come off.
Come on, baby. There we go.
And once I was able to get the lower knuckle loaded with that spring and then mounted on the cage, I used a little bit of Loctite to hit that stop pin. And then after that cage was mounted on the parallelogram, or vice versa, the pulleys got a little bit of high performance grease. The cage on the other side got a little bit of that thread locker, and then everything goes together. And now we have our fully assembled, fully refurbished rear derailleur. So we're going to hit some of those pivot points with the full synthetic oil. We're going to work that in and then move on to the brakes. Thankfully, after doing that rear derailleur, the brake reassembly was smooth sailing. So just inserting everything on this mainline bolt, pressing in the springs, which are attached to these little plastic clips that house themselves to create the tension. And then once you screw it onto the frame and add the cable, voila, you have a fully functioning brake.
And after the brakes, everything was done. And look at how some of these pieces turned up. I am so pleased with how the cranks especially turned up. I did polish off some of that Nervar lettering, but that's okay. It's still on the other side. I just was a little aggressive with my polishing. The headset cups looked really good, and the brake levers polished up real nice. So now that everything has been polished and cleaned, it's time to make a determination on what we're gonna do with the frame, and then also service the wheels. What path am I gonna take? I don't really know yet, but if you stay tuned, you'll find out next week. To all my new followers that just started joining me on this journey, thank you. I'm so glad you're here. I hope you're excited about what you've seen so far, and you're kind of chomping at the bit to see more. If you haven't followed yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all the progress of this build and for future builds as well. Thanks again for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.
This is not fresh shredded.